Good evening. I'm Kate Good. I'm the executive director of the PRC, and my giant dog decided now is the time to come crashing through the room. We're really glad that you can be here tonight. We've had over 70 people register. We're hoping a few more folks join us live, but we will be recording tonight's panel discussion as well, so that folks are able to also view it later. Just to let you know now, because I've had a couple of folks asking, we will be dividing you into breakup rooms. The breakup rooms will either focus on affordable housing or organizations' response to homelessness. So you will be able to select the room that you're going into, but you'll want to just be thinking of which room that is. And for folks who are coming late, we will likely just assign them. So if folks continue to pop up into your breakout rooms, that's why. As we all know, there's a national shortage in housing at the moment. Housing prices have increased 7.9% year over year, and the local housing market in Lancaster is very tight. Affordable housing properties can be sold and flipped to turn a profit here, and an influx of high income New York City, Philadelphia, and Baltimore renters push property developers towards luxury projects. So finding or staying in an affordable living situation has been a crisis for low middle income Lancastrians. And so tonight we want to focus on how individuals, organizations, and churches can help with this crisis. This is the first event in PRC's year-long look at housing in Lancaster County. And we have another panel discussion with church-centered involvement coming up on May 24, also by Zoom. This is also our first event that is part of the Cherry Academy. Starting in this year in 2022, PRC's annual Cherry Memorial Academy is a year-long series of learning and engagement opportunities around a central topic of vital importance to our community. Events will explore each year's topic of social importance through various lenses, and the Academy honors the legacy of Reverend Dr. William Cherry. PRC began working with the Emergency Rental Assistance Program last year, helping more than 50 clients through the process. And while we're no longer able to provide that support, we do work with Tenfold and the Lancaster County Housing and Redevelopment Authority to provide food to those temporarily housed by both organizations. But tonight is about the organizations and individuals who are working in housing day in and day out. These are the experts, and we're here to learn and listen to them. We really appreciate everyone who is able to join us. We know that the last 2 years have just been really tremendously busy and overwhelming for most of the folks here tonight. And so we really appreciate their time and energy. We did invite a few organizations that weren't able to attend, but we really appreciate everybody's time tonight focusing on this. You should have received information about each organization, and that also includes contact information. So thanks to everyone for coming tonight. Most of the discussion tonight will happen in the 2 breakout rooms. Room 1 will be a conversation about the big picture issues in this area, as well as affordable housing issues. And room 2 will focus on homelessness. While you can only join one room tonight, you will be able to watch both rooms on the recording, which will be emailed to you tomorrow. Rhoda, also from the PRC, and I will be moderating questions for the panelists. Please chat your questions to us at any time in the breakout rooms, and we will pose them to the panelist. Who wants to go first?
Dana Hanshin.
Thanks, Justin. You're going to follow me. Dana Hanshin, President and CEO of HDC Mid-Atlantic. For those of you who are not familiar with HDC, we've been around for 50 years providing affordable housing. Got our start here in Lancaster County, but we have 55 affordable housing communities in 3 states, Pennsylvania, Delaware, and Maryland, serving over 4,000 residents, about 3,000 apartments. Justin?
Thanks, and Kate, nice job on the breakout. I think you pretty much split the number of people that were in the room in half.
We try.
I'm very impressed with that. Justin Eby, Executive Director of Lancaster County Housing and Redevelopment Authorities. We also are the Land Bank Authority for the county. And so we have a wide range of housing resources for affordability through home repair, through rental rehab, assisting agencies like HDC and Community Basics, and finding the gap for the larger low-income housing tax credit projects. We also are the County Housing Authority, so we have about 900 units scattered throughout the county that we have vouchers with. Additionally, we are the lead agency for the ongoing emergency rental assistance program. And lastly, we also work with community development projects within the boroughs and other urban areas, and address blighted properties and revitalization efforts.
Rebecca? Or sorry, Lisa, I see you just unmuted yourself, sorry.
I figured I would probably end up being next. So I'm Lisa Greener. I am the Executive Director for Community Basics. We're a nonprofit real estate developer and manager of affordable housing, primarily in Lancaster County. We have over almost 500 units that we manage in the county, and we use a lot of funds from Justin, thank you so much, to make our affordable housing actually come to fruition. We currently have one community under construction in the county in Liddittsboro, on the campus of Bohemia Manor. And then we have another one that we will hopefully start this fall.
Thank you. Rebecca?
I'm Rebecca Geisler. I am the Deputy Director of Health, Housing, and Community Development at the City of Lancaster. I've been here just under a year, so I think my experience is, my tenure is shorter than my other panelists, so glad what should I say, facilitators of this conversation together. I am in the Department of Community Planning and Economic Development. We are responsible for property maintenance and housing inspections, which relates to affordable housing on the day-to-day basis, making sure we have quality housing in the city. We also have the Planning Bureau in our department, and we do the zoning and planning efforts across the city for both residential and commercial developments. We have the Community Development Bureau, which is our federal funds related to the Community Development Block Grant, Emergency Services Grant, and the HUD-led grant for lead remediation in homes. And that's one of our major pushes for this year, is really toward lead remediation in homes that have lead paint and creating lead poisoning in children. We also are responsible for redevelopment of blighted properties in the city through the Property Reinvestment Board, and then through the Redevelopment Authority of the City of Lancaster, and also Land Bank falls under our purview in the Department of Community Planning and Economic Development. So we are both on the creating side of affordable housing and also ensuring quality housing and health and safety of the residents of Lancaster.
Thank you. So a pretty broad and basic question, which is, what is the current state of affordable housing in Lancaster and the city? Maybe we can start with, and then the county. I think everybody has a sense that it's challenged right now, but it would be helpful to hear sort of how you each see it. And then also it might be helpful to have a perspective of how this might stack up against other communities. Are we experiencing something very similar, or is this an unusually tight housing market?
I can start.
I was gonna,
The city side. Or Dana, you can start, go ahead.
I was just gonna start with the last question first and saying, this is not unique to Lancaster County. It is across the country, and in larger metropolitan areas, it's even more extreme. So it is, I've been in this work for 25 years and it's very hard to make a dent in the need for affordable housing. And in the last few years that we've experienced, it's becoming even more dire, just in terms of with the pandemic, but also in terms of issues around wages and income disparity. You can't think about affordable housing without thinking about income levels and how that has also challenged the equation to be able to actually meet the demand.
For sure. And the city, as part of our comprehensive plan, we're engaging in developing a comprehensive plan overall across the city, what are for our goals over the next decade. And we just conducted last year a housing availability study through the Center for Regional Analysis at the Economic Development Company of Lancaster County. And through this study, really, we have hunches over time, that this is happening, or we see it happening before our eyes, but really the data bears that out as well. There's a housing shortage in the city of between about 1,100 to 2,500 overall units in the city, and that's for across about 22,000 households. So that's a significant need. And with the costs of housing, low vacancy rates, and limited housing stock is really driving the prices up as well. And so housing cost burden, we're just seeing that widespread across incomes in the city. And that really indicates that households are spending more than 30% of their income on housing. So this is definitely a reality. And I think there are some solutions, but really, as it's trending across the city, the country, and the city and the county, we are continually reminded that the market forces are not in the favor of people needing affordable housing right now. And so that's a reality for us here locally as well as across the country.
I'll chime in. I think it's important for all of us, and we have a good team. Our staff tries to do a good job of educating everyone to understand that there's different meaning of affordability to different people. Specifically, someone who's making $15 an hour is different than someone who's making 20 or 30 or 40. And so we want to look at housing choice and the availability of that housing choice. And it's not only low vacancy in the rental market we haven't seen before, but it's the affordable home ownership vacancy rate as well. And so we don't have enough movement between the two. And so we're having a tight rental and home ownership kind of situation, whereas we have funding that is set aside for first-time home buyer type programs. They're not competitive in the current market because we have to inspect the unit, make sure it's safe for them. We have to ensure that we're not going to set them up for failure and build equity. And so that's the first question: how's the housing market? It's not good across all boards and across the city, county, state, and country. And so there are ways to address it. There's ways to assist folks, but when you don't understand what affordability means to a specific individual or family, I think that's something you want to think about when you're helping someone that's coming to you for housing assistance.
Thank you. Lisa?
Well, they covered a lot of stuff there, but one thing, the statistic that I found that I thought was rather interesting is in Lancaster County, there's only 20 affordable and available rental homes for every 100 extremely low income renter households. The average in the state is 38. So, Lancaster County is hurting overall as opposed to, even the state categories. So it's challenging. It's like the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, and it's harder for people to find something that they can afford, especially as rents and home prices continue to increase.
And I would add that for HDC, we have 24 of our affordable housing communities in Lancaster County and over 1,800 households on waiting lists for that housing. Of those 24 communities, we've had to close waiting lists of 9 of them because it takes over 3 years to wait for housing, and that's both senior and family properties. And we get, even though we are Mid-Atlantic, we get 100 inquiries a day by phone and by email inquiring about affordable housing. And that's not affordable housing 3 years from now. That's today. I need affordable housing. And we simply don't have the availability. I think, Lisa, you could probably speak to your own waiting list, as well as when people reach out to the housing, the Lancaster City Housing Authority. Very, very challenging. The other statistic, it's devastating that you get that call and you can't direct them anywhere where they have access to being able to apply for housing that's readily available. But PHFA, the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency, also did a housing study in 2020 and noted that in Lancaster County, approximately 7,000 apartments are needed for households that earn an average of about $25,000 a year. That's 30% of area median income, and roughly 2,500 apartments are needed at 50% of area median income, and that's around $41,500. The average income for HDC households is $30,000 a year, and that comes out to about $15 an hour. These are wage earners, unless they're on fixed incomes, whether if they're seniors or on disability, and that's basically double of what the minimum wage is in Pennsylvania. So really struggling, where there is a market failure to address the housing needs of those who are lower income wage earners, active in working, but unable to find housing that meets their income.
I'll add a little bit more. As far as overview, we had our Eviction Prevention Network meeting today, and I believe the number was a little over 100 calls per week that our 211 system is getting for folks trying to find an affordable unit. And so, something to take away tonight is connecting individuals and families with available units is a struggle right now. Housing location services and being able to provide lists of available units because the vacancy is real low. So we have a lot of people that are housing is so critical, but now it's compounding with other issues because they're stressed out trying to be able to afford or find a unit. And with Dana's waiting list closed, we have other individuals coming to us saying that they've applied and they're wasting their money on application fees. They're in line 15 for the one available unit that's open in their area. So, and that's not just the city, that's the county. We have a unique perspective right now on this, given the emergency rental assistance program, where we have about over 8,000 households that have applied for rental assistance. We've assisted a little over 3,000, but the common theme is for folks that we have approved but don't have an obligated rental, so a lease or some sort of obligation to pay rent. The biggest issue is finding available unit, and that is compounding folks on fixed incomes, whereas landlords are increasing rents without much reason to, because they can, and the building down the street raise rents. And so people on fixed income, or even like the $15 an hour wage earner, cannot come up with $200 to $300 next month because that's what their rent was increased by. And this, we're seeing this. There's multiple calls every day to our helpline, to our staff. So this is something to relay to you all. It's a theme that continues, and there really isn't a good answer at this point.
Yeah, I think something else to point out, I don't have the data of where we were 5 years ago, but really this is new in the recent years. And I think as a community, we continue to have to be creative in this newer context with how very, very tight the market is, and where houses were selling for low, like even through the redevelopment authority. We were looking to find people to buy them, for $1, redevelop them, and now they're really it's just such a tight market across the board, and I think that's new for our community, and a new challenge for us.
I'll
Thank
give
you.
it, sorry, Katie.
So go
Katie,
ahead.
one more. And I'll speak on behalf of my colleague, Barb Wilson with the City Housing Authority. As a housing authority, we struggle to even provide housing to someone where we can give a landlord incentives. So our emergency housing vouchers, we each received combined about 78. We can't give $500 away for a landlord to take one of our vouchers. And there's no ability for us to open up our waiting list when we can't get individuals where there is a guaranteed payment going to the landlord. And so that that is something that we're struggling with as well, to provide both in the city and county.
Thank you. Tim chatted me an article, which was a story on NPR this evening, which said that the country as a whole is seeing the worst affordable housing shortage in many, many years. So clearly this is not specific to us and yet impacts us all the most. Also got a question, Justin, about that your services can't be accessed sometimes because of the competitiveness of the market and due to inspections. I think it's talking about first-time homeowner loans. Could you speak a little bit more to that, please?
Yeah, so we have funding. We've traditionally over the past decade provided funding to tenfold. It also goes through our housing trust fund dollars that realtor transfer tax. There's a fee on that goes to a trust fund here in the county. Those funds are set aside to help first-time home buyers. Right now, maximum $7,500. That helps with down payment assistance. So it creates that gap to get someone started in a home. The funding requires an inspection because of the source of funding. And so when we have first-time home buyer and you add on that, one, there's down payment assistance coming, and two, inspections required, owners of property over the past year and a half say, oh, well, I got 3 other offers over asking. They don't require an inspection and it's cash or no other contingencies. That's what's driving out the affordability. Whereas just 2 years ago, we put 25 to 50 new homeowners through that program. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. So I think as I listen to you all, as I've, we intersect with a lot of folks who are struggling to stay in their housing, and so utilizing community meals or other food resources to help expand their budget. Are we in a pretty hopeless situation? Do we have opportunities for things to improve over the next several years? Are there things we can do as a community that will improve things in the next year, or this is really a long-term problem that we're looking at the next 5 or 10 years, or this is sort of where we're going to be for a while?
So I think I'd like to sort of talk about it in a broader way in terms of what you need in order to, there's systemic sort of change that needs to have happen. And then there's things you can do right now, right? And so, for HDC and for folks like Community Basics, we utilize a program called the Low Income Housing Tax Credit Program that basically provides about 75% of the cost to build affordable rental housing, and there's simply not enough of that resource available across the board. And we have been advocating, at the federal level to see increases in that program. And that was really through the Build Back Better bill, but it did not come to fruition. And we're trying to piecemeal it together right now at the federal level to see about increasing resources. I think also challenging is the fact that even when you are building affordable housing through this program, through the Low Income Housing Tax Credit Program, it often doesn't ensure affordability at 30% of a person's income. And that coupling that with a voucher, sort of an operating subsidy, ensures housing affordability. What we can provide is below market rents, but we also know that even families and households that are living in in developments like HTC and Community Basics, they're paying more than 30% because their incomes are that low and they're struggling. And we know that their housing stability is threatened by a single crisis or emergency. And so it even becomes harder for them to hold on to the housing that they work so hard for. And I think it's really, again, it's about resources, it's about land. If you're looking at the type of work that Lisa and I do in terms of building a certain number of units, because you need to have scale in order to make the project feasible. But above all, I think tonight, and talking to folks from the community and community members, there's another part of the equation beyond, you know, land and money. It's community. And I would break that out into two groups. It's political will and it's community support, and using your voice and becoming a champion in your communities when affordable housing is being discussed and proposed, and showing up and letting them know it's a priority, and talk when resources are on the table and decisions are being made about those resources, to be able to share what you think needs to have happen with them. In addition to what things need to change in terms of policies.
And it's not just, you know, advocating for the affordability of the housing, but also the density. There's a lot of communities that are really fighting density. They don't even want to follow what the County Planning Commission is recommending, which makes it even more challenging as we're trying to make these projects work, and we need to have a certain number of units. Now you need more land because you can't build as many on a smaller parcel. So just, you know, even zoning regulations have impacted us and what we can do as well.
I was waiting for someone to say zoning. I mean, just to get through the process to build affordable housing, then you've got to, you know, put a whole bunch of subsidy into the project to get the rent, operating budget to a level where you can actually offer affordable rents. And so there's some things we need to be looking at. You know, creative solutions, you know, connecting jobs with housing. Again, you know, that's always been talked about, but being strategic. There are 3,000 less or unfilled positions in Lancaster County. You know, we are already starting to be approached by companies saying, how can we partner in making sure there's some affordable housing near our company? So I think that's something newer we should, well, not newer, but something we should continue to focus on, because at the end of the day, we need to be leveraging all these sources. We need to be looking at the donations and, you know, whether it's faith-based or a foundation-based or, you know, local, county, state, federal funding. Bringing all those pieces together at the end of the day is going to really help move some of these projects forward.
And I would add, and I'm going to add, increasing construction costs. Is it going to get harder? Yeah, it has. And folks may be familiar with HGC's proposed development in the West End neighborhood of the city at College Ave. And we put in our application for funding resources a year ago. We got that fully funded, and now we're looking to bid that project out and are expecting approximately a 20% increase on construction costs. So what does that create for us? A gap where we need to find more money. And a lot of other communities outside of Lancaster and other states are looking at their ARPA funds, which are the funds that were allocated to states and counties and municipalities during COVID to address a multitude of things. And housing is one of the uses that it could be used for. And in the state of Delaware, they've designated $100 million to go to affordable housing. Last year, Pennsylvania dedicated $50 million to go to the construction cost increases for existing projects that weren't able to move forward because there was such fluctuation during construction that if they didn't provide it, they wouldn't have it. They wouldn't be able to move those projects forward. So that is definitely a big question mark as we move ahead in terms of how we estimated these deals to what structure, what they look like to what they are now with the uncertainty of the construction pricing.
A couple of things that we've been doing over the last couple of years and will continue to do is kind of that smaller scale rehab, where we take 2, 4, 8 units of housing in typically more urban area, We've done a lot in Columbia, where we're, it may only be a few units, but we're preserving the affordability for at least 15 years, and preserving the structure itself and the housing stock, and looking at housing preservation is important.
Yeah, I think the short-term wins can also lead to longer-term wins. And Justin mentioned, I guess it was before everyone else just jumped on, that the county just released the request for proposal for affordable housing funding through the county and the city consortium working together. And also the city has dedicated, City Council has dedicated $5 million of the ARPA funding to affordable housing, and that RFP will be coming out as well. And as we look at this complex issue, this local governments, the city, the county, we're committed to putting forth all our efforts, but given the complexity of this, we really rely on our community partners, organizations, ones on this call and others as well, so many, to really implement projects and programs and be creative thought leaders in this space. And just given that we're limited humans working to solve these complex problems, the more ideas we have coming from the community, the maybe new people jumping in and saying, that citizens saying, we have some ideas, we think this can work. Really, I think that's going to improve our outcomes. So I really encourage the community to, even if you haven't applied before for funding, or you have some ideas, find a way to get involved with those of us that are on the call, or other local organizations, because we really need everyone's support getting around this. So we are looking to allocate funds this year, and that will be an ongoing process. And as we have the funds at the local government level, really looking for partners with creative solutions. So we invite your applications, and we invite you to enter into the conversation as we start those. And then I would say too, there are other grant programs to improve units, and Justin said this also at the county level through our lead hazard control grant, healthy homes grants. And those are really accomplishing two aims, where landlords want to improve their properties but don't have the money. The city can help support that. And then also those come with affordability restrictions for minimum of 3 years up to 15 years, depending on what program you go through. And really those funds can help landlords who are committed. And I know we have so many landlords in Lancaster City who are committed in the community and just trying to make it work for the community and provide affordable housing. So just want to offer our partnership and invite the community into the process as we go along.
As community members, at least one thing that Dana and I are doing is advocating on behalf or with the Housing Alliance of Pennsylvania to increase affordable housing funds. And so there's a specific program that a lot of us use because it's very flexible in whether it's programming a single family rehab, a rental rehab, or supporting 60-unit development, which is the FAIR funds that go through PHFA. And so that's something else you can do is advocate with your elected officials to increase existing funding resources as well. Specifically, we're looking to increase this program by 40 million to 80 million in the state. We've been going around to our senators and our representatives here in Lancaster County, and a lot of the projects that are within the communities have benefited from the FAIR program. So just being a voice as far as increasing funding for existing flexible resources is key as well. And something we need to continue paying attention to is the conditions of units, substandard housing. Landlords and tenants have not really communicated for the last year and a half, 2 years. We're almost through a whole year's worth of of our 900 units in Lancaster County, and probably about 75% of them failed the inspection because landlords have not seen there could be as little as a carbon monoxide or some kind of issue like that, or a broken window or something else. Sorry for my kids, by the way.
Yeah, I can piggyback on that, on what Justin said as well. We are continuing to protect our housing stock through property maintenance and housing inspections. And as you're out and about in the city, we welcome your feedback when you're seeing, different issues. You can email us at housing@cityoflancasterpa.com or call the housing hotline. All that information is online as well. But we want to be able to respond, and building really a responsive bureau there to protect our residents and to protect our tenants that are renting. And so really encourage you to partner with us in that. And we take an educational approach as well as an enforcement approach. So really out there in the community, trying to help people get the resources they need, helping landlords to figure out how to resolve issues related to property maintenance. So we really want to take that educational approach as well, keep the community safe. So we welcome your partnership with preserving our housing stock as we, work with the community to do that.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Could you all speak maybe a little bit more about zoning? I know that I think Lisa mentioned it in the initial overview, and I think that's often a hot topic of conversation around the county. What changes could be made to the zoning laws that would make a difference, both I think in the city and then in the more rural or suburban communities?
So we have 67 counties, and within each county, there's multiple municipalities. I think there's 60 of them in Lancaster. Each municipality has its own rules. They have their own overlays, they have their own districts, they have everything. So anytime you're going to build a community or you want to check out land development and see if the project can actually work, you have to go and look at that particular municipality's rules and regulations and various ordinances and try to make sure that your project fits their rules. One thing that would be great is if we could have something, even if it was just countywide, then you would only have to read one set of rules for the county. Because each of these sets of rules, maybe you can only get 12 units in a building in this municipality, and you can only do 6 units per acre. So now you got to start calculating and how much land you need to get your 60 units. So, now you're talking 10 acres, where technically if you could get a little bit more density and that kind of thing, you could maybe do it on 5 acres and still have a very nice livable community and not waste so much of the land. We have people that argue about saving farmland. Well, guess what? To save farmland, you need density. But nobody wants density. You feel like you just run in circles to try to explain, how to more effectively use the land in the county. I'll let somebody else add a little bit more onto that. It just gets me frustrated.
Can speak a little bit to that. One of the findings of the housing study was that the housing stock isn't always completely in alignment with the family type. So we have a lot of single family homes with many bedrooms, while we have a lot of single residents. And so it can exacerbate the problem of sort of that mismatch and availability of housing units. And one of the ways that the city has developed in the interim housing strategy is through innovation. So really looking and exploring more flexible shared living arrangements through zoning could lend themselves especially to younger or older adults. Exploring zoning for accessory dwelling units, which is a different kind of dwelling unit that would maybe be better for smaller family sizes, 1 or 2 people. We have had a tiny home in the city, and that went through a zoning process as well. So really analyzing our square footage requirements and other rules to see where we can approve smaller units that could provide more options for those demands for single people or smaller household sizes. And looking at reduced parking requirements and parking minimums. I know that's a big issue in the city. You know, reducing those parking minimums such as downtown or commercial corridors where there are bus transit. So these are sort of some of the ways we're exploring to innovate and really capitalize on emerging housing design types and facilitate lower cost housing options for smaller family sizes. And all of this is in the interim housing strategy in the city. So if you would like more details, but that is one of the 5 pillars, is to look at ways we can innovate through zoning in the city.
I'll just add, I think if we can't get to a county-wide goal, just look at, start with the regional, working collaboratively regionally within the municipalities. Just because there's a boundary between the 2 municipalities doesn't mean they already have shared services or shared community. So, that could be something, to start pushing towards. I know the County Planning Commission with Places 2040 is really pushing regional collaboration and efforts for planning and zoning.
Thank you. A question, are there unique issues with rural housing in terms of, I assume, affordable housing?
We have a home repair program that is addressing, we have 2 really. We have one that's really addressing the your standard ownership of the land and the structure that sits on the land. We also have one for manufactured housing and or what most people call mobile homes. That's kind of not necessarily unique per se. Lancaster County, we have a large number of that type of housing where that is affordable to that person or that family. And we continue seeing aging stock of manufactured housing, and so there's only so much we can do to repair, and because there's no equity in the structure. It's more like your car title, and so I think that's something we want to continue looking at, because if we lose that housing stock, that affordable housing stock, and we're not addressing all types of housing, then we're gonna have a continued issue of affordability and availability and housing choice in Lancaster County.
Thank you. Are there other questions from folks in this room? I've had a number of folks chatting to me, but please feel free to send any questions my way. In the meantime, I will ask another question, which is, what are sort of the best practices, or how do communities address the negative, negative impacts of gentrification as well? I know we've talked about high rental rates, but it also, as the downtown Lancaster has shifted some in terms of more higher end condos and other housing. Are there ways that gentrification can also be addressed that doesn't diminish the downtown and other areas, but also increases affordable housing?
I will speak to what I would like to see in terms of looking at equitable development practices in the city. And I really think it requires collaborative leadership on part of many stakeholders to talk about what it means to attract development and revitalization efforts, and what are sort of good community benefit principles, whether you are a market rate developer or a nonprofit looking at affordable housing. There are many things you can be doing to increase the equity and your equitable options in your development approach, and whether that's you're looking at, seeing if you could carve out a certain percentage of units if it's market rate as affordable. I mean, I see Yvonne Berge here from Lancaster Communities with their project on King Street, which is for middle market seniors. They are doing a carve out for affordable and looking at the numbers for that. And are there incentives is there a toolbox of incentives that the city, Rebecca, can provide to incentivize people to consider that? I think there are other ways that you can look at equity in terms of looking at job creation and ensuring the local workforce being employed, looking at supplier diversity in terms of when you are having spend for your projects, are you employing minority and women and local businesses? I think you can look at community safety and green space as well. And looking at how you're creating community on the street or on the block so that people are engaging with your development in a way that feels like it's open and welcoming. So we've done some work in a group I think we're all involved in, Lancaster Equity Community Development Corporation, to think about what are the sort of things, good things that a developer can do to think about, being able to address a range of issues, maybe not all of them, in terms of looking at minimizing whether or not it would be gentrifying or meeting to a higher market, right? So that if you're a market rate developer investor, your interest is to maximize your profit. That's the way it works. So what are you doing to figure out how you can incentivize them to participate and look at income or populations across an income spectrum and not just the highest one that maximizes the profit. And I think I would like to see a toolbox developed of whether or not those are policies or incentives or resources, or even when a developer is coming into the city, that the city and the stakeholders are seeing them as partners and not adversaries, and saying, okay, how do we work together? Here are things here are principles we would like you to uphold in your development. What can you do? What can't you do? Here's the way we can help you. And how do we get there together, instead of seeing it as like a tussle, which it often gets. I mean, even as an affordable housing developer, we're often in trying to advocate for what we need across the board. And I think that it'd be really great to have some like an A team, to help when investments coming into the city, to say, here are the things that principles that we're upholding. What is your project? How can we help you reflect some of these within your project, knowing that not all may be met, but we can sort of figure out how to do it together. That's my ideal scenario.
Yeah, and you mentioned Lancaster Communities. I think that's a really good example of a recent project that has happened that way. And when we meet with developers, I think you're right. I think we're trying very much so to have that collaborative approach. And sometimes our zoning laws or laws that haven't been looked at in a long time maybe prohibit some things that we would like to promote. And so I think that's important too, as we continue to look at our ordinances and look at how they're promoting affordable housing in the city. I think another thing that we can do related is to match up the market rate developers with the resources, similar to the way we did at Landis Homes, and really have those mixed uses and mixed income developments and promote affordable housing in the units that are being developed. Within 5 years, we have a goal of developing 2,000 additional units, and many of those are already in the pipeline. So working with those developers, even now, as we look at the home funds that we just put the RFP out for, looking at the ARPA funds coming up, and approaching people who have market rate projects and saying, how can we get this done? And I think it's a challenge. I think the subsidy, as you mentioned, Dana, earlier, as the construction cost goes up, the subsidy to make the numbers work just gets higher and higher. And with the limited dollars that we have, it's a real challenge to be able to make the dollars work those developers. I would say we definitely share that goal at the city, and Mayor Sirachi has had this really as a primary goal of hers, is ensuring equitable and safe affordable housing, and we continue to make that a priority and recognize quite, you know, humbly with the limitations that we have with funds and cost increases. But I would definitely agree with that. And then related to that is really this multidimensional approach, and Dana, you mentioned that as well. It's not just building units, but also looking at community, looking at the comprehensive plan, and really getting community feedback and ensuring that we're really getting engagement from across the community, and what different people, different parts of the city would like to see in our city and in their communities, and really being responsive to that, because the communities know what they need in their communities. And so really listening to that. Maybe I had one additional thought that maybe is not often recognized, but in terms of supply and demand, even when we're adding additional market rate units, that could really impact the overall availability of housing in the city. And so as we add overall units, we're looking to add 2,000 additional units and have 15% of them. That's our goal over 5 years, 15% of them affordable across the board. And so we're
I think Rebecca froze, which is one of the downsides of doing these meetings on Zoom. Yvonne, we've talked a bunch about the new project that Landis Communities is doing in the downtown. Are you open to speaking a little bit about that?
Sure, I can. And I want to start by saying thanks to Justin and Rebecca and the city and others who are really helping make this a priority and a reality. Lots of support from Tenfold, HDC, Dana, and others. This would not be becoming a reality if it wasn't for a village. So I really appreciate that. We are doing a middle market 55 plus for older adults. Landis Communities decided that part of their vision from the beginning was to serve older adults with less income, and CCRCs have evolved over the decades to be more expensive, more regulations. And so what we have in Manheim Township with Landis Homes and many of the other CCRCs in the county are not affordable to those making between 30 and 85 or 100,000 a year in their retirement. And so this is a way to do that. And at the same time, we are committed to affordable housing, which is for those making less than the average median income, maybe 80%, 60% or less. So we went into this saying, look, we want to do at least 10% of the units for those at 80, 60, 50% of AMI or less. And so we are doing a capital campaign with the goal of raising $500,500,000. We have a grant and some funds from the city, home funds that are helping us have 10% of the 79, so 8 units affordable for older adults. And we have, I think, don't quote me on this number, but it is close to 75 applications. And of those 75, 50 are qualified, income qualified for those 8 units. So that just, yeah, that's our experience of what Dana and Lisa have been saying about the need. So we're super excited about this, and our board now is saying, hey, 10% is great. Next project, do more than 10%. And we're thinking, oh my goodness. But it's a great way to get affordability into middle market without needing to wait for that second, third, fourth round of tax credit applications. So super grateful for the community that is helping to make this happen. We will have commercial space on the ground floor with a doctor's office, some sort of eatery or restaurant, and then another organization as well. So truly a mixed use building.
Thank you. And how many total units?
79,
Okay.
and the doctor's office will most likely be in the 80th unit, so 79.
Thank you.
You
It's
bet.
a great project. Rebecca, you froze in the middle of saying something. Do you want to sort of catch us up to where you were going?
I'm not sure where I froze, but I'm really glad that Yvonne jumped in, because I think that was one of my examples. Maybe the very end of what I was saying was that even when we're developing market rate units, it's also increasing the overall supply, which is helpful to the housing market. And our goal is 2,000 new units within the next 5 years, with 15% of them being affordable. So we welcome a further partnership with you. I'm glad to hear that your board is saying to do more. I'm glad to hear that it's been working out. So really trying to work directly with developers to make sure that they know the resources that are available, and to reach that goal of 15%, we're really going to have to work collaboratively with each and every project coming into the city.
Thank you. We've got a number of questions that have built up in the chat, so I will work through them, and some of them are refer back to earlier parts of the conversation. In terms of the programs that help improve rental properties or homes, is there a long waiting list for those programs? What areas are they seeing these programs being used most often?
Take this one. So in the past, we've maybe done 15 to 25 home repairs a year. I think in just the first quarter of this year, we had 25 referrals for home repair. So we do have funding available for it, and we do have somewhat of a waiting list. But that is a good thing for us as far as knowing the volume and scaling up to address more and more home repairs. What we do need is, with construction costs going up, looking at additional resources and match funding that's flexible. As a quasi-governmental agency, we are typically working with state or federal or local funds that have different strings attached. And so right now our maximum loan is $25,000, and that is a lot has to do because of lead-based paint rules and regulations back in the 70s and 80s. Well, I guess in the 80s, as far as how much we can put into a project. So having additional funding to help with the construction costs would be helpful for us to continue to scale up and move forward. Funding is available currently if you know of a private developer or owner of at least 2 units or more that's looking to renovate and bring the unit up to standard standard codes. If there's major systems issues, HVAC, plumbing, look for a 15-year affordability period that will be tied to that. We currently have that as an ongoing application. And again, this is for the 59 municipalities outside the city of Lancaster, is what the County Housing Redevelopment Authority programs primarily have eligibility for.
Thank you. And in terms of the city led programs and other programs that can help rehab homes, is there a long waiting list for those programs, Rebecca?
There is not a long waiting list. We are able to get in fairly quickly for the lead hazard control program. Also, we have a critical repair, which has historically been a loan program, but recently we started a pilot for those at 50% of the area median income, doing it on a grant basis for critical repair. So things like structural damage or electrical, water heaters, roof repair or replacements. So we are able to do those. There's not a waiting list, and we're looking to continue to fund those programs so that we can continue to preserve housing and home ownership. Really, people have been in their homes for a long time. That's one of the main ways we would like to help people to stay in their homes.
Thank you.
And I put that in the, Kate, thanks for copying and pasting. I couldn't respond to everyone, but Kate put our website in the chat there. So that's all of our information is there. And our lead program and our critical repair is out of the same office. So you should be able to reach someone fairly easily.
Thank you. My sister's going through the lead program right now, and it's a really great program. Are there specific zoning restrictions in one or more of the municipalities close to the city that are restricting the density we need for affordable housing?
I'm by no means an expert on all the municipalities, but frequently there are restrictions on density. They may pick a certain area they don't want density, or it may be the full township or borough.
Thank you. Any other thoughts from anybody else on that one? There was discussion about ARPA funding from the county, this is a question for Justin, so maybe I'll come back to that. Here's a question. What's the viability of hotel conversions as affordable housing strategies for Lancaster County? Seems like we have a lot of hotel stock out there.
I know Justin's been looking into some of those as well. So there he is.
Sorry, I'm watching 2 kids and 2 dogs.
It's no problem. I have 2
What was the
questions. I don't
question?
know if you heard them. The first is ARPA funding from the county. We've heard about the city, but not the county.
Yeah, I was at the county commissioners meeting today, where they informally provided an initial framework and application, did not list housing. That is up for discussion. It sounded like next week on the county commissioners work session, which would be Tuesday. I forget what April, what would that be, 6th? 5th, Tuesday the 5th. Their work sessions start at 10 on Tuesdays, and then a public meeting on the Wednesday, the 30th. I'm sorry, the 6th, and they typically start at 9:15. So that just came out today, and so we're all digesting what that means as far as the community.
And the other question that might be the best fit for you is, what's the viability of hotel conversions as affordable housing strategy for Lancaster County? It seems like there's a lot of hotel stock out there.
There is, but not necessarily available for the price you would need it, or even really available. We know of properties that are close to being condemned or have been condemned. One in particular off 501 Lidditz Pike, which would have had roughly, I think 140 units. That property, I think, had $300,000 in back taxes and at least double digits in issues as far as lending practices, where it was upside down. And so while that property is available and could be a great conversion project, to actually acquire it may not ever be a possibility. But it definitely looking at existing properties like that, where that's an easier conversion. You're not looking at the new construction costs, you're looking at more of the rehabilitation costs, which, for 60 units instead of $60 million project, you're maybe down the $8 to $10 million range or less. But Lisa and Dana would be more of the experts on those numbers. But yeah, definitely conversion to single room occupancy, or maybe 1 bedroom or some other conversion would be a quick win for adding affordable housing stock.
Thank you. Anybody else want to speak to that at all? Another question that we got in the chat is, what changes in transportation policy might help? A lot of the NIMBY reaction has to do with parking and traffic. It seems like that could be, if that could be mitigated, it would help.
It's a very, very good question. I know there's a lot of parking discussion at the city and city council meetings and on parking policy. I am not an expert in this space. What I can speak to is in the affordable housing and the interim housing strategy, talking about changing parking regulations for downtown where there is public transportation available, perhaps not requiring as much parking. So looking at that, but I unfortunately can't speak any more broadly to that, but I'll see if I can find the website and post it in the chat.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Kate, can you, the question again was?
How improving transportation could also make affordable housing more of a possibility. I'm assuming part of the question is sometimes affordable housing out in the county isn't very accessible to the bus line or other public transportation.
And I think we also need to look at also, you know, a lot of the jobs are out in the county as well, and transportation for those who are living more in the urban areas to get to the jobs as well is something to think about as far as transportation, parking, the need for both to be amplified in the county. So yeah, I don't think there's a lot of different view and a lot of different municipalities. Again, we go back to the theme of each municipality having different, being a stakeholder in this discussion as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, kind of related to the parking and zoning. There are some municipalities that will require up to 4 parking spaces for 1 rental unit. And in our affordable housing communities, not everyone even has a car. And if they do, it might just be 1. So 4 parking spaces for 1 apartment is a little excessive, where, you know, if we find 1.5 is usually more than sufficient. So, and we do try to look for properties that are on bus routes, but you know, then the bus route changes, so you don't always win there either.
Dana, we're going to say something.
I was just going to share anecdotally for HGC's developments for the parking spaces and lots that we provide. They're probably about, I mean, outside the city, they're probably about 75% full in terms of what we're required to do, and then what is actually needed by the residents of the community.
So the overwhelming question we got from everybody who registered for this event was, how do I help people find affordable housing? And I almost hesitate to ask that because we work with a lot of folks who, you know, they just keep hitting a wall, it feels like. But I think, you know, that's what a lot of folks are trying to figure out tonight. So what would you recommend?
I think there are a lot of currently programs and resources available to get them connected with. That's the first step. Actually being able to then take that program resource and get them into housing is the difficult part right now. And so I think, again, more on the practitioner level, having communities support families, individuals, and helping identify available units, because you are within the community or you might know resources that we do not know. You have connections as your congregation or your community might have different ways to connect people. So making sure that you know the available resources that are available, whether it's a home repair, a rental assistance, a lead program, that or you know, even advocating for additional changes to your community's density or zoning. We heard today. We also talked about you know, looking at planning, comprehensive regional planning to connect the jobs and the transportation. So going to those meetings and contributing to that as well. And then again, you know, maybe not duplicating efforts work together and kind of put the resources collaboratively to make some change.
I mean, like I said earlier, it's disheartening when you know that somebody's approaching you in need of housing and there aren't a lot of options available immediately. And so I think there is that challenge about what are the existing programs that are available and where you can refer people to. But I would also sort of stress what Justin talked about is even beyond that immediate need, what are we looking for change in the long term? And where are those opportunities to use your voice, to be an advocate and a champion? I think Justin provided the date and the time of the commissioners talking about the use for ARPA money. And if that is a need that residents of Lancaster County see as affordable housing being a dedicated resources being dedicated to that, I think being able to show up and advocate for that resource or other resources that can increase our opportunity to continue to meet the need is really important, and not just coming from practitioners, right, who do this day in and day out. And what is most effective in terms of being an advocate and champion is the everyday citizen recognizing the need that that either yourself, your family member, your neighbor, your coworker have struggled with these issues. This is not unfamiliar to any one of us in our families, and to be able to bring that consistently to elected officials who make decisions around resources and policies is super critical. They're held accountable to the people of Lancaster County.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Lisa or Rebecca, anything to add?
I can just echo what Dana said. It is very disheartening to have someone come in and say, I need somewhere to live. The home where I'm staying right now is being condemned and I have nowhere to go. And it breaks your heart to tell them that I'm sorry, I don't have anything available in the price point. So yeah, correct. Advocating so that we can try to build more would be great. Unfortunately, the timeline to build more is years. But Dana and I will keep our organizations plugging along and creating more and as fast as we can.
Yeah, I think for homeowners in particular who, I know for older adults, it can be very difficult to stay in their homes. So really trying to refer people again to make sure that they're having the support that they need. We have a health and housing case manager on staff here at the city. So if people are going to be displaced, again, we also struggle with where to refer to, but if people do have a place to live and need help accessing programs, particularly homeowners, hoping, to really support people to not be displaced in the first place, but it is very, very difficult. We're seeing that as well.
I'll just put a quick plug in for our panel discussion in May, where it's a lot of small organizations and churches who have worked at this by, purchasing units in their own communities or working to help make rental units more affordable in the city. So while that doesn't solve the entire problem by far, it is how small organizations or churches have worked at this. So if you have any last questions for the panel, please chat them to me now. But while we're waiting for those, just a question for the four panelists who've all given a lot of time to us tonight, and really appreciate that. I think maybe one of two questions, which is either the last 2 years I think have been really hard. There's just been a lot of ups and downs with housing, and so what inspires you to keep working in this field, in this area? Or what is your dream for affordable housing in Lancaster? Is there something tangible that we can learn from tonight that is a bigger picture dream that one of you or all of you have?
For me, I would say the reason why I'm involved in this work, it's my life's work in terms of dedicating my professional life and to providing affordable housing. It's a cornerstone for stability and economic mobility. If you don't have a safe, stable, affordable place to live, you can barely think about what's the next step. And I think we have a responsibility as a community, as a society, to see it as a human right and to continue to work collectively on ensuring that everyone has that opportunity.
Thank you.
I haven't been in the affordable arena quite as long as Dana. I had to go through the market rate mode and the commercial mode before I got to affordable real estate development. But in my mind, everyone deserves a place that they're happy to call home. They need somewhere safe and affordable to live, and it shouldn't be difficult. It should be easy to find and easy to afford.
And what drives me every day is just trying to just try to look at how we can do things better within the community, not being status quo of how connections programs, this is how we always have done it, just kind of challenging myself and others to keep thinking, what else can we be doing? What are the barriers that we have set up? What are the barriers that we can remove? Shouldn't be that hard to call a number and get connected to housing assistance. That's just looking at things more holistic, and again, just the collaboration nature of Lancaster County. There's a lot of people that are dedicated, and that dedication, hearing Dana, hearing Lisa, Rebecca talk about this, just kind of makes me want to continue and let us come up with more creative solutions to address these issues.
I feel it's such a privilege to be working at the city during this time. Mayor Sirachi has such a strong commitment to equity and furthering fair housing in the city, and city council members have been equally committed and dedicated, and we have such rich conversation from the policy level and dedication, and we have resources at our disposal, and as a city, as a municipal government, and it's just a real honor to be working with people who are like-minded in terms of equity and the commitment to all of the blocks. The mayor's strategy of block by block, truly that comes out every day in our work, and that's very motivating. And the recognition by the mayor that the availability of affordable housing is really a key issue for city residents, and the way that we hear this again and again, residents, it's just very motivating to come in and work on creative solutions through the community, through partnerships. We have so many dedicated partners and developers as well. People really driving toward the value of equitable housing. Certainly not across the board, but so many, so many, and that's really inspiring.
Thank you. Well, I really appreciate all of your time this evening. Thank you for the great questions that everybody chatted and for participating. And thanks, Dana and Lisa and Justin and Rebecca, for your time. We really appreciate it. We will be sending out this recording this evening, or I'm sorry, tomorrow morning, and you'll also get the other recording as well. So thank you again to everybody.
We provide some stability funds to help get people stable, and then just general support working with our community partners and figuring out how we can be a support. And we're also part of the Eviction Prevention Network.
Thank you. Jack from Water Street.
Hi, I'm Jack Crowley. I'm the president of Water Street Mission. I guess the quick and dirty of it is Water Street provides housing to anywhere from 150 to 225 people a night. And we have a mix of shelter, emergency shelter for individuals, both men and women, emergency shelter for women with children, and then we also have residential longer-term programs for men, single women, and women with children. And the split is about 50-50. We have about 100 beds available for shelter, which is short-term stay with support to getting back out into the community, into their own housing, and then long-term, which can be, it's really individually designed. There's not a prescribed length of stay. It could be anywhere from 6 months to up to 2 years based on what kind of issues people are trying to overcome. And the focus is on life transformation. And so again, it's going into deeper issues, not just how do I find a house.
Thank you. Mike from Tenfold.
Good evening, everyone. I'm the CEO of Tenfold, and Tenfold is the union of Tabor Community Services and Lancaster Housing Opportunity Partnership. So if that name's not familiar to you, hopefully those other two legacy organizations are more familiar. The organization provides a continuum of services from crisis response, particularly focused on homelessness, including homeless outreach, the coordinated entry service on behalf of the coalition, as well as shelter. We have a shelter that focuses on families and emergency shelter and veterans in particular, though during the pandemic we did expand to serve singles as well. That shelter is known as TLC. And then we provide rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing services, which are part of the continuum of homeless services, with the goal of helping people find housing, following the housing first model that we can talk about in a little bit, with the idea that once people are safely housed, it really facilitates progress on a lot of other aspects of their life. Beyond homelessness, we're providing a variety of supportive services, working closely with landlords and tenants on things like eviction prevention, foreclosure prevention, landlord-tenant mediation and education. We do fair housing work, particularly education and outreach around the protections that landlords and tenants in particular, as well as borrowers, can expect under state and federal legislation. And then we're also working on financial empowerment. So we have a financial empowerment center that's providing a whole range of services to help people meet their goals around financial security. Often that starts with a conversation around budgeting, savings, credit improvement, looking at debt and trying to pay down debt, but it's also about longer range goals, like buying a house, buying a car, going back to school, or starting a business. And in particular, our home buyer program helps households become first-time home buyers with education as well as down payment closing cost assistance. The last part of the services we offer really focus more on the supply side of the equation. So we have an arm called Tenfold Community Lending, and what we're doing there is lending to developers, both for-profit and not-for-profit, who are trying to incorporate affordable housing into their projects. Sometimes that's a single family home that's being rehabbed and turned over to a first-time home buyer. In other cases, it could be a very large project like those that are led by many of our colleagues who are in the other breakout room, where maybe they're using the federal tax credit program and maybe doing a 60-unit development. So trying to work on both sides of the equation there, but ultimately around this goal of helping people achieve equitable housing and financial security.
Let's hear from Echoes next.
Hello, my name is Bree Anderson. I'm the executive director of Echoes. We're a social services agency that offers programs to residents of the Northwest region of Lancaster County. Our programs typically fall into 4 main categories. We have emergency shelter, supportive housing programs, eviction prevention, and information and resources available.
And Factory Ministries. Hello, I'm Anna Beasley with the Factory. I am the Director of Adult Advocacy, so I oversee our social services department, the Factory Market, and the housing programs. We are a resource hub more in the rural part of Lancaster County, so well, we're located in Paradise, Gap, that kind of area. And so we help to connect folks experiencing poverty with resources. We help to make a lot of sometimes the Lancaster City resources available to the folks in our area who otherwise would probably not, well, they won't go into the city. So we kind of help to walk alongside of them through of quite a few different programs, opportunities for them to be connected. We also do some of the eviction prevention and some of the county housing programs as well. We have 4 transitional housing units right now, 3 for women currently fleeing domestic violence, and then 1 transitional family housing unit as well. So. Thank you. And the YWCA.
Hi, I'm Raina Metzger. I'm the Director of Operations. However, I ran the residence program for 8 years. We offer 6 family shelter rooms, which we take our direct referrals from the CHART program under Tenfold. We also have 12 rooms that are Section 8 base. We have a contract with Lancaster Housing that, if many of you know, Section 8, it's 30% of their income. But again, those referrals also must come from CHART because those persons need to be identified as homeless to qualify for those Section 8 rooms. And that leaves us with we also have a VOCA room that is ran through our sexual assault center. So even though it's in our housing program, the sexual assault center does put the clients in them. They come from either highly human trafficking or sexual trafficking, and that's why that department runs that room. Out of that, then I have 20 units that are private housing that are fair market value. I do work with Amy Kendall over at Housing just to make sure that we're staying in line with that because she gives us that guidance for our 12 Section 8 rooms. It is private housing, so we do follow the housing laws. Anybody can apply online or in person for those, and we will house anybody that identifies as female for those units. And just to kind of jump back, our family rooms are for single fathers with children, and that's case management. Every 2 weeks, they start with 30 days. I make as many referrals as I can, and I continue to work with CHART to try to get funding to house them out, security deposit and first month's rent.
Thank you. And then there was recently a transition with the Homeless Coalition. So we actually have 2 people kind of helping us cover the history of it. Jen was the executive director for many years. So we've asked her to join us to give a little bit of that history side of it. And then Izzy is currently involved with the Homeless Coalition. So he'll be able to give us more up-to-date information. So Jen, why don't we start with a little bit of your history with them?
Sure. I recently transitioned into a role at Penn Medicine, which is why you see that in my screenshot. So the Homeless Coalition started as the Lancaster County Coalition to End Homelessness in 2009. There was some federal legislation that was passed at the federal level, redundant, sorry about that, where the federal administration really felt that community organizing was going to be important in addressing the complexity of homelessness. So the HEARTH Act, which is an acronym, really strongly encouraged communities to reach out broadly to different stakeholders than what they've had in the past. So at that point in 2009, the Coalition to End Homelessness, which is now Lanco My Home, was founded with a business chair of Phil Wagner, who's now with the Conservancy. He had been with Isaacs. Obviously, we, for those of us who have been here a long time, knew that he was with Isaacs at that time, and it was also chaired by the Board of Commissioners. Up until that time, there was an organization called the Interagency Council for the Homeless that existed for probably about 20, 25 years before that, where we sort of circled around a grant that comes into the community trying to address homelessness the best that we could, but there was not much coordination in how folks entered programs, how individuals found shelter each night, things like that. So what the coalition did in its early few years was really to organize around, trying to eradicate homelessness in Lancaster County. And then in 2015, up until 2015, the coalition was housed within the county's Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services. And then in 2015, it moved off of the county structure under Penn Medicine Lancaster General Health. And then in 2022, it has moved to the Lancaster County Housing Redevelopment Authority. And if you look at, there's a number of data points that you can look at over time to measure homelessness. One that is typically one that's reported nationally is something that's called a point in time count. That's 1 day a year. The coalition goes out with teams of people to count individuals that are living outside or unsheltered, and then works with shelter staff and providers to count folks that are staying in shelter. If you look over time, I think 2009, we had 666 individuals at that time on a given day experiencing homelessness. I'll let Izzy talk to you about what the current status of that is, but the number has come down. And I think that really speaks to the collaboration within the community and the partners. The coalition's role was really trying to help partners and providers focus on just what we could do collectively and the power of collective impact.
Thank you. Izzy, do you want to kind of pick up and talk a little bit more about the current situation?
Sure, I'm happy to. Hi, everybody. I'm Izzy Smith-Waddell. I am a program specialist with the Lancaster County Homelessness Coalition, aka Lanco My Home. I began in 2020 when Jen was the director of the program, and we were housed still at LGH. We have since moved to the Lancaster County Housing and Redevelopment Authority. Unfortunately, our immediate supervisor, Deb Jones, was not able to be here this evening. She's teaching a class, so I'm here in her stead. So Jen is correct, and I will pick up with the PIT count since we just finished that for this community. So if we look at successive years from that 666 PIT total in 2009, she's correct. So for a number of years, the number of unsheltered or unhoused folks that we had in our community, as estimated by that snapshot, went down through the 500s into the 300s over the last couple of years. And we have to consider, of course, COVID in that number has ticked back up, but still the overall trend is downward. And I'm interested to see where that data goes in the next couple of years. What goes side by side with the point in time count is another count called the housing inventory chart, which includes not just folks who are in shelter or living on the street, but also includes folks who have, for example, who are occupying transitional housing opportunities, who have been able to take advantage of one of the community's rapid rehousing programs, for example, as administered by Tenfold. And if you look at those numbers, we'll be releasing PIT and HIC count numbers for the community for the most recent count here shortly. If you look at those numbers over time, you can see the really massive role that rapid rehousing as a program has played in getting people off the street. And I think it is, as Jen says, it speaks to that collaboration directly. I will also mention, since Deb is not here and we are now part of the Lancaster County Housing and Redevelopment Authority, something that has undoubtedly become a part of the homelessness services of the homelessness services network during the past year of the COVID-19 pandemic is the emergency rental assistance program as administered through the Housing and Redevelopment Authority. Not just in terms of paying people's rents, but in terms of negotiated agreements to house people who otherwise would not be able to find housing, even if their rent was paid, housing these folks in hotels out on Route 30. And so just to contextualize, having seen the questions beforehand, I think a lot of the challenges that the whole network is facing, because there is really good work being done is about stock. It's about the housing to transition people into as they have moved through our various programs. So I'll pass it back.
Thank you very much. That did tick a number of the boxes of questions that we had coming in, of just kind of the general state of things. So some up-to-date numbers were very helpful. And were those for the whole county, or was it looking at a specific subset?
So what we just discussed was the whole county. And Rhoda, if you don't mind here, I'll pop back over to my spreadsheet. Yeah, so if the PIT total for 2020, or rather for the count conducted in 2020, which is really acts as a snapshot and ostensibly a look back on the previous year, had a count of about 461. The following year's count was significantly lower, but that's owing to the fact that this community got, pardon me, a waiver that was offered to many communities by HUD because of the uncertainty involved in the early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic. We did not perform the unsheltered outdoor count part of the PIT count that year. And so that number does not play a role in the count. I don't know if there's time or if there's meaning for it, but at some point here with this latest year redacted, I can share a screen and show the spreadsheet of previous years HIC and PIT counts as downloaded from the HUD database, but as time allows.
Thank you very much. We might circle back around to that. I think I want to hit some of the other big things first, and then so we can take questions from the folks that are here, but we can certainly circle back around to that. So just talking about the current state of homelessness in Lancaster City or Lancaster County, I'm wondering if anybody else wants to weigh in on not necessarily the giant numbers that we just heard, but also how that is impacting your organization specifically, or how you see the current state of the work that you're doing.
Sure. So we have the Elizabethtown Emergency Shelter, and previously we had just moved into a new building actually this past fall in 2021. And previously we had only been able to offer 30 beds, and that was a pretty tight space. And with our new space, we increased that to 30 individual beds with 3 private family rooms. For reference, we served 33 unduplicated individuals in 2020, 2021. And we're near the end of our regular shelter season. We have decided to extend with support from the Housing and Redevelopment authorities, but we're at 77 unduplicated individuals, so more than doubled from the year previously. So I think there's probably a few factors going on. One, I would say that the COVID mitigation efforts have probably helped keep people housed during the pandemic. So now we're seeing, as some of those start to peel away, some of those protective factors, we're seeing more housed, but we would not be able to accommodate the number of individuals and families that we're seeing without our new space. So we were surprised to see that, because we've reached our highest numbers that we've ever seen as an agency. So.
I think one of the things that's important to keep in mind when we think about homelessness is just how tightly linked that is to limited incomes, as well as the cost of housing, which itself is closely correlated with the limited supply. So we know, according to data that was produced by United Way of Pennsylvania, that about a third of our population in Lancaster County is at the ALICE threshold, which is an acronym for asset limited, income constrained, but employed. So these would be households that don't meet the federal poverty income guidelines, but who are still very vulnerable economically. And so it's like one significant shock to that household budget that could lead to a downward spiral of worsening poverty, which could also lead to a loss of housing. And from the research that the Homeless Coalition has tracked over the years, the main trigger for homelessness locally is usually a significant disruption, which can be something like an eviction. It can be a healthcare scare. It could be a loss of an income from job loss, or perhaps a change in the family, or even a death in that household. So those triggers are very significant, and we need to remember that there's a sizable portion of people in the county who are in that economically vulnerable category. So even though we're looking at numbers that do sound large, and it is a significant number of people that are served through the Homeless Services Network by all of these great agencies every year, it's just sort of the tip of the spear. And there's a whole lot of folks above and beyond that population who potentially could have worsening housing conditions. And so that's one of the reasons that it is particularly challenging to design sustainable solutions, is because we know that the incomes remain low. Too many households not making enough money for the cost of living in our community. And then, of course, at the same time, we're seeing really rapid rises in rents and mortgages that is pushing people well beyond the threshold that's considered affordable, which is 30% of your income. If you're starting to spend more than 30% of your income, it means that you as a household are starting to make different types of trade-offs. It's going to be harder to afford other things that are also really, really important and essential for good quality of life. So hopefully that just adds some sort of broader context on why year after year do we see this persistent group of individuals and families who are struggling through a period of homelessness. It's because there's a much broader base of sort of economic uncertainty and economic struggle that exists in our community.
I can say at the YW, our turnover is not as much as it was, especially with the pandemic and the no eviction. Also, you know, raising the hourly to 15 is great, but not everybody has done it. And with that increase came the increase with rent. And just being mindful, I don't want to be the Debbie Downer. Most people look for new housing towards midsummer, right before school, especially families, because they want a stable place to be. And this is when leases are going to be renewing. And I've come in contact with a few clients that the reason they've gotten evicted is because the jump has been so large. It's been, okay, you pay $900, we now want $1,200, or we now want $1,300, because maybe that landlord is trying to recoup from another tenant, which is unfairly put onto the tenant that it's now becoming homeless. So I kind of foresee that after the summer, we're really going to struggle as a community, and it's going to be tenfold when we get to that winter season with our families as well. So I'm not turning over rooms as quickly as possible. We have a small time frame with our clients, but with how difficult the housing market is, and you know, a mom with 1 to 2 to 3, even 4 kids, that $15 an hour really isn't doing anything. So we are keeping them longer. We don't want to put them out to homelessness. So I know that the YW's numbers aren't going to be anything fantastic, but we're also trying not to put families out in a world that's just so unpredictable right now, and really even more for them to fail than 2.5 years ago.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Rihanna. I'm sorry if I pronounced your name incorrect.
That's okay.
Yeah, the difficulty of helping people find affordable housing as they're exiting. So affordable housing is a dual-edged sword as well, or the lack of affordable housing, because it's contributing to the number of people becoming homeless, but it's also making it that much more difficult when people who have, you know, found gainful employment, dealt with some of the other complicating issues that they might be dealing with, and they're at the place where they're ready to move back out on their own. Finding affordable housing is just unbelievably hard right now. Our case managers and life coaches, it's a constant struggle, and I mean, we counsel one another on it all the time, because you can only hit your head against the wall so many times. It becomes really frustrating, and that is, so we see longer stays during COVID, you know, from a policy standpoint, and I know every sheltering organization handled that differently, but many of us lifted any kind of time frame limitations on people staying during COVID, obviously, because we wanted to provide physical safety was #1 priority. So we weren't exiting people. We didn't, even our 60-day shelter, we didn't have 60-day limits on. And then as we transitioned into winter, even as COVID was getting better, our winter rules apply, which are, we have much more leniency on the length of stay for our shelter guests. And then our residential guests, who again have been working on deeper issues, their ability to transition back into the community is really challenging at this time. So the turnover rates, as you said, at the Y, the turnover rates are low. Turnover rates at Water Street for a long time were low. We're getting back to a pattern of helping people exit out, having empty beds for new people to come in. And I think the saving grace in the midst of all that was the ERAP program and the collaboration between Housing and Redevelopment Authority, Tenfold, even the Parish Resource Center taking on direct services. I can't, Mike, you know how many different organizations were involved in that, but the number of households served through ERAP has greatly protected our end of the system. The people who are actually on the street homeless and needing to get into shelter immediately. So I think that was a saving grace in the season, but ERAP won't last forever. The eviction moratorium is over. And so, you know, as a community, we're gearing up for that. And that's going to be the newest challenge.
I think ERAP is, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm real quick.
Okay.
I think ERAP is a blessing, but like you said, it's not going to last forever. I have a client right now that was approved for ERAP, but again, that still is a struggle because ERAP is required to stay with their policies at fair market value, where landlords are not asking for that. You know, I have a parent with one child that was told, you know, based off of what, you know, he was approved for is $1,100 for a 2-bedroom, which is reasonable, understand, but nobody's offering a 2-bedroom at $1,100. We're getting 2 bedrooms between the $1,400 to $1,600. So there's still even that delay. Like, it's great, but there's that delay because ERAP can only give so much based off of the HUD funding or the government funding. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. I was just gonna say, I want to piggyback on both what Mike said and what Jack said, but I appreciated what Mike said about the folks who were they're not really registered in the PIT count because they're kind of like doubled up or a hotel or things like that. We work with a large population of those folks who are, their housing is somewhat toxic in a sense because there are so many people in such a small space dealing with all sorts of different things. You have the mental health component in there, trying to find childcare to work. And then, but I will say, to add a little bit of hope to this somewhat hopeless discussion, but the ERAP program, a lot of the folks that we have pretty good relationships with, and we're pretty relationally focused, so we really lean into that. And the ERAP program has been pretty substantial for a lot of our folks, allowing them to get a breath. And then that's when we really try to support them with some heavy case management to really help them. Okay, this is not going to last forever. How can we budget now? You're getting your rent paid for the next 3 months. What are you going to do with that money that you would have otherwise put towards these things? And so really buckling down our case management to be targeted on those, like a 3-month, well, we do a 3-month goal track kind of a thing with our folks on budgeting, or maybe it's trying to find childcare, or even just helping families learn how to think a little bit outside the box to be able to exist in those crowded households in a more healthy way. Sometimes we have to, I feel like for us, we have to step back a little bit from the huge picture and just help the families learn how to cope through the upcoming weeks, and then really plan for when the ERAP money goes away. But it has created, I mean, quite a few families have not been evicted due to the ERAP. So that's been a big blessing for us to be able to facilitate.
Yeah, I agree. So CAP is part of the ERAP program, but we help with the utilities piece of it. So it's been great to be involved and just kind of see what's happening on the ground floor. And see how many thousands of people are being helped. I think what's been interesting that COVID has really helped to bring to light, I mean, it's a positive, it's a negative, but we can make a positive spin on it, is that one of the things that I heard in the beginning of COVID when we were trying to figure out what to do about eviction prevention and all of that was, well, if nobody's being evicted, I can't get anybody housed. And so by having that happen and kind of having the standstill, I think we've gotten a better picture of how many people actually are experiencing homelessness within Lancaster, and that there really is, we're not just saying we need affordable housing. I think it's really become more obvious. And so with that, you know, that brings more advocacy that we can be doing. It helps us to get better data. And it just kind of helps us to all get on the same page. So we kind of had to get off the hamster wheel, and we can start creating more plans and new plans. And unfortunately, these things take time. So, you know, that 5-10 years, it's in these questions here. I think I can come back to that. But yeah, I think that's been a really fascinating opportunity over the last 2 years. It's unfortunate that it exists, but since that problem was already there, I'm glad it's been brought to more light.
Actually, that's a great segue to a question from a participant. How can we advocate for good, safe, and equitable housing in Lancaster County and Pennsylvania? So is there anybody that has some suggestions for either individuals? We have a lot of faith communities or, you know, civic groups of various sorts.
Sure, I will give a few specific opportunities that are coming up in the near term, one at the local level and one at the state level. There's a program in Pennsylvania called FAIR. It's administered by the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency, but it's authorized by the state legislature, drawing on funding from the realty transfer tax. So every time a property is sold, we know there's been a whole lot of that. It has been a very hot market for buyers and sellers over the past few years. There is money that is put into a trust fund, but there's currently a cap on it that is set by the legislature. So right now it is at 40 million, but there is a process underway led by the Housing Alliance of Pennsylvania to increase that cap to 80 million. And the analysis they've done is this will not have a detrimental effect on the Commonwealth budget. The dollars are there. This is just authorizing more of them to be used specifically for FAIR. And FAIR is probably, among governmental sources, the most flexible source of funding to address affordable housing challenges. It can be used for bricks and mortar. It can be used for supportive services. It can be used for existing affordable housing communities that need funding to preserve affordable housing. So often when housing is created with tax credits, there's typically a 20-year affordability period. At the end of that period, many organizations, like some of our colleagues from HTC, Community Basics, Landis Communities, they want to preserve that affordability longer term. So FAIR can be another vehicle for that. So truly, if it's related to housing, if it's related to homelessness prevention, if it's related to supporting the creation of new housing, FAIR is a great vehicle for that, and it benefits every county in the Commonwealth. And it's been very beneficial for Lancaster County. There's probably a dozen different organizations over the years that have received those funding, have received awards from that funding. So that would be one very concrete one to call your Lancaster representative or our state senators to say, hey, could you support this? Could you sign on to this? There is information on the Housing Alliance page specifically about what the proposal is to increase the cap. So I think that's a big one that will benefit, all Pennsylvanians. The second one is the American Rescue Plan Act dollars. So the city of Lancaster and the county of Lancaster both received very significant allocations from the American Rescue Plan Act. There was a final rule from the U.S. Treasury Department that laid out the different ways that it can be used. And so there's a big opportunity under, Izzy's wearing a different hat as President Smith Waddell of City Council. The city has already made a very significant $5 million investment in affordable housing. I mean, that's truly extraordinary. They struck while they had this opportunity. Once probably in a generation, maybe once in a lifetime opportunity to use these dollars to really change the conversation, to get projects that are in the pipeline further across the finish line. So the city has made a significant investment already. There's still probably an opportunity to advocate with the city of Lancaster to increase the commitment to housing even further. The county has so far not made that designation. Today, there was a proposal in the work session that suggested some possible uses with a draft request for proposals. There was a number of uses that were identified in this document. Housing wasn't one of them. It did reference infrastructure, it did reference technology modernization, it did reference clean water, it did reference workforce development, all really important issues, and also issues that are tied in very tightly with housing. So that would be another opportunity, is talk to the commissioners and say, hey, let's use some of this American Rescue Plan dollars to solve the housing challenge. Now, the county and the city together have also set aside some money from a different pot of American Rescue Plan dollars called Home ARP. That's some money that HUD received out of that pot of funds. There is an RFP that's open right now. There's an opportunity for any organization that's interested in that to apply to those funds. But that is just one piece of the pie. The larger American Rescue Plan pie is quite a bit larger. And so there could be a really unique and special opportunity to allocate some of those resources to improve this crunch that we're all facing. Everybody's struggling with it. I mean, there are so many people who are struggling with their housing, and we have this extraordinary amount of resources that typically the county would never receive, right? It's a silver lining to a horrible pandemic. So let's use it for something that's really good and that'll last for a long time. So those are just two ideas for how people could advocate for some significant investments in affordable housing and homelessness.
I think one other place to give attention to, and if you listen to the tape of the other breakout room, you'll probably get a lot of good suggestions around this. So I'd encourage you, if this is your question, to go back and listen to that. But the other place is the local municipalities and being open to the development of new affordable housing, because that is, the money is one barrier, but local approvals and support is another. As we see in our county right now, there are several projects that may or may not happen, often because of not fully informed understanding of our county's own growth plan and where housing growth is needed and how our local municipalities play a role in that. And so, without naming any specific situations that are going on right now, concerned citizens need to be just as vocal as those citizens who are worried about low-income families moving into their neighborhood. And we need voices of sanity and compassion to be at those municipal meetings as well.
I think I'll just pile on to what Jack said, I guess wearing the other hat that Mike mentioned. But I mean, even with the Homelessness Coalition, there is a sense that these things are city problems, that affordable housing, that homelessness are city problems. And that has detrimental effects, not just on the city as a municipality, or even on the nonprofits doing really great work inside and outside of the city, but also to our clients, specifically. This is not, I don't have a number off the top of my head, but I'm sure that the need for affordable housing, like new affordable housing units in the county, is in the thousands, right? Like we're talking about many thousands of units, and there simply isn't the space in 4 square miles that we have in the city to accomplish the task. But also from a relational standpoint, I think I heard Bree mention, like, Echo's emphasis on relationships. Folks who are in need or who find themselves homeless should not have to give up their community connections to get those services. So they should not have to bounce to another municipality or another county to get help being housed.
And I think another, thing that we can talk about advocating for is maybe expanding or changing the definition of homelessness, because when we talk about rural homelessness, that looks different than it does in the city. I would say some of those who experience rural homelessness are less likely to be living on the street and may be living, in their car or with relatives and overcrowded housing. So I think when we restrict that definition of homelessness, now we're talking about the HUD definition of homelessness at the federal level. So this, really ties into that advocacy piece. But that's not really like the rural reality for most of us. And I think when we kind of exclude that piece of it, we're also limiting the federal dollars and the funding that can come to those who provide that. I mean, I think shelters are obviously less prevalent in rural communities. And so I think that's another piece that we could continue to advocate for.
One piece of rough data just to back that up, and this goes back because our COVID numbers are a little different, but pre-COVID, Water Street would average well over 1,000 unique individuals per year coming to us for shelter or long-term residential on every year. And our numbers consistently, over 50% of the individuals who came to us for shelter, their last previous address was not in the city of Lancaster. It was in the county of Lancaster. And one of the misunderstandings, a lot of people think that people are drawn to Water Street from outside the county, from major metropolitan areas, and those numbers don't bear out either. At any given time, I think the highest number we've ever seen in my tenure over 7 years in this role was 12% that came from outside the county, but the vast majority of them had connections in the county. They weren't random people just showing up in Lancaster looking for a place to stay. They moved to Lancaster because they have family here and they had a job opportunity and then it fell through. Or they moved in with somebody and the relationship fell apart and then they ended up needing shelter services. But the reality and so again, that number would only ever maxed out at about 12%. But the rest of those, of over 1,000 people a year, 50% of them were from Lancaster County, 50% of them were from the city. And again, that was their last address. Again, many of them had moved into the city because there was more affordable housing opportunities when they were kind of on a journey towards homelessness. So it wasn't necessarily that they originated in the city. They may have been from Mount Joy, and then they moved into the city because they could get an apartment at Duke Manor or something like that. And then eventually ended up, other circumstances leading them to have to come to Water Street. So homelessness is not a city problem. All that to say, Izzy, 100%, homelessness in Lancaster County is not a city issue. It's an entire county issue.
Mm-hmm. That mirrors our experience at TLC. Recently looking at our 2021 data, and it was 60% last known address, city of Lancaster, 34% was in the county of Lancaster, and then there were 6% that were out of county for a variety of reasons. And so absolutely, even though it happens to be located, on East King Street, it's serving the whole county, and individuals from all over the county are spending a period of time living there. Usually it's around 4 to 5 months. So.
And I just want to jump back to what Jack had said previously, the kind of NIMBY, not in my backyard kind of idea around some of these projects. And I think one of the ways we can advocate and educate is by finding those opportunities in the community that exist to kind of figure out what biases might be there that are creating some of these thoughts. I will tell you that RISE and CAP does poverty simulations. So we offer them to the community. You can hire us, or we do it on a donation basis. So we are happy to come and provide that. We have some other educational opportunities to help just kind of give some context and perspective around what poverty is and people who are living in these situations, and to kind of break down some of those stereotypes that we're told as we're growing up. And so I think that can be really helpful, because some of these ideas around what people think, oh, there's low income housing and what that's going to mean for their neighborhood is really not correct at all. But that's the thought. So that's something else that I would offer.
Steve, you had wanted to ask a question. Do you want to unmute yourself and pipe up?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Thanks so much, everybody. This is a fascinating discussion. I'm Steve Rakow. I'm a pastor at a Lutheran church in the city for about 27 years now. So as a maybe a senior colleague in the ministerium, I get a lot of questions about what do I do with this family? Steve, what do you do when somebody comes to your church and there's, you know, they're living in a hotel and they're not in the pipeline? So my question is maybe just a hope that out of this kind of discussion and collaboration, somebody might offer a kind of triage tree that people who are responding to families who aren't in the pipeline yet might use, even, you know, with the dismal hope of getting a quick solution to the problem. But this happens to me on a monthly basis that, you know, I have a family and it used to be, well, you know, try the mission. And these days the reply often comes back, well, the mission's full, I've already been there. I know that may not always be true, may just be an excuse, but does anybody want to take a stab at putting something like that on the recording that we could go back and look at and say, here's kind of the best way to navigate this overlapping conglomeration of wonderful organizations that are all trying to help with this problem. Here's how to help the family steer through that. I'll leave it there.
Shannon, I think I know what you're going to say. I'll let you say it.
Maybe. I mean, well, I think everybody knows about 211. What I'll say is if you have a family you're working with who isn't quite experiencing homelessness yet, but has some crisis. So with the renaming of Navigation to Rise, we've also changed kind of how we're doing our work. And we have a resource liaison division within Rise. And so what they are doing is that crisis intervention, 30 days or less, needs some stability. They can reach out to us and we can try to help mitigate whatever that crisis is to keep them from getting to the point where they will lose their home or experience homelessness. I mean, we don't have magic wands, but we do have a lot of connections with resources, and we're continuing to find new and innovative ways to help with those resources. So Mike, if you had something else.
And I would say if they already are experiencing homelessness, 211 is the first stop in that continuum. That would open the door to what's called the CHART assessment. It's the Community Homeless Assessment Response Team. There's a team at Tenfold that does it. There's a team at Echoes that does it. There's a team at the Factory that does it. There's a team at CrossNet Ministries in New Holland that does it. Jenna, Izzy, help me out. I feel like I'm forgetting somebody unintentionally. The idea is to help that person connect to an organization closest to either where they are or where they have connections, where they would like to be. And that the assessment is looking at two things. One is what's called diversion. So it's this idea of what other resources might that household have available to them, and the CHART team members helping them problem solve around that. And the second would be making connections to the next step in the assistance process. So sometimes that's shelter. The CHART workers work very closely with all of the shelter providing organizations to try to match them to the shelter option that best fits with that family circumstances or that individual circumstances, and also recognizing, as you said, Steve, there's often some limitations in terms of capacity, but doing the best to make those connections as quickly as possible. The other piece would be the handoff to additional supports like rapid rehousing, and rapid rehousing would include some housing location assistance, some security deposits, and then some ongoing rental assistance, as well as case management, with the hope that that really sets that household up for success in whatever housing option they ultimately land in. So and all of that may have been redundant to what you already know and what you're already doing, and but hopefully that's helpful for anybody who wasn't familiar with that option.
I suspect the RISE option might also be unfamiliar to some folks. Rhiannon, will you send us some contact information around RISE, and I can send that out afterwards to everybody as well. Thanks.
Can I say something real quick? Sorry.
Oh, sure.
And in light of that question, I think especially when we're talking with just people who want to help other people, and the system can be very overwhelming, or you don't even know all of the supports that are available. I do think that's why these organizations 211, they listed all of these organizations who do know the resources that are available. So sometimes it's just walking alongside of that family to get them connected to someone who can then really just lay out what the next steps would be, because it is very overwhelming and all these terms are being thrown around sometimes, and people think that they kind of know what's happening, and that so that's what these organizations are for. So to support families and people also trying to support families through this process. So but it can be very overwhelming, but yeah, those are my encouraging little piece there.
I will also just say, if anybody else has questions, feel free to chat them to me as well. I'm curious to turn a little bit towards the future and maybe some hopeful aspects to this, of where you see, and maybe not, maybe it's going to get worse before it gets better. But I'm curious where you all see things going in the next year, 5 years, 10 years, what's coming?
Before I look to the future too far, one of the baseline questions you had is, what is the state of homelessness? We talked a lot about numbers. We talked a lot about kind of the short-term implications. I think one other aspect that's really important for the community to be aware of, because I think this again leads into where can caring people in the community advocate and maybe encourage change systemically or governmentally. The volume of individuals with significant mental health issues who are a part of our, friends that we're trying to serve who are experiencing homelessness continues to grow. And I think, I don't want to speak for every other organization that's on here, but I know at Water Street, and I know with some of our partnering agencies, those numbers are significantly higher than we've experienced in the past. Just as COVID has had an impact on people in stable living situations and their mental health, we're seeing that impact, our friends experiencing homelessness at an even greater level. Beyond that, severe mental health issues, those who really need, intensive case management, inpatient care, the resources are not there. What, is intended to provide for our people who are struggling with that, we don't have the personnel across the agencies, the government funded agencies or the private ones, and we don't have the funding. And so people are often left with less than they really need in support services. And so it just makes it more complicated. That's a reality that we've identified and have made changes here at Water Street. Our ability to work with people with more significant mental health issues has increased, 2 to 3 times over the last 5 years in what we have on site to do with them, to work with them, and we still can't handle some of the things we're seeing. And so not to go to a dark place before we start talking about the light, but but I think that's a reality that is often overlooked. Homelessness is a very complex issue. It's not just about affordable housing. There are a lot of other factors. And I think systemically, statewide, nationwide, the mental health system is a major contributor and kind of co-conspirator to what we're dealing with.
And I think there's, one other thing that we hadn't really addressed yet that I think is kind of crucial when we're talking about homelessness is that there are significant racial disparities in the housing world. And, I don't know that I'm the expert on it because Elizabethtown is a pretty homogeneous community. But I think we need to talk about, that there's definitely those who are disproportionately affected by, the impacts of COVID than the rest of the population. So I think that should also be thrown into the conversation.
That's a great point. Bree, I'm glad you brought that up.
That didn't lead to a lot of cheery hopefulness. I apologize, but I do think so as we talk about, the futures. We talk about what's going to be helpful in the next year, what's going to be helpful in the next 5 years. How do we see things progressing? I know for us at Water Street, you know, that's something that we're looking at very seriously is how do we adapt our support structures and programs. Part of it is we've been partnering with Phil Haven for the last several years, and that's been expanding. So we have, you know, Phil Haven counselor, multiple counselors on site providing, I think we're up to about 60 hours a week of clinical counseling services for our guests. We have a medical and dental clinic on site, which allows us to then also work with medication support for those guests who are coming to us directly from Lancaster Behavioral Health Hospital and other facilities that are coming to us. We're better suited to serve them, but we're still not able to handle everything that's coming our way. But I think that's one of the things all of us as providers, we have to continue to look at. How do we partner? How do we get those resources? Because staffing up on our own isn't always feasible for licensure reasons, for liability reasons, for all kinds of cost reasons. But are there ways we can partner more deliberately to bring those services where they need to be? And even the Housing First model, which I think has strengths and weaknesses to it, getting people in stable housing allows you to address other issues. I totally agree with that. But if we don't have the resources in the community to bring the mental health resources to somebody once we get them in housing, the likelihood of them staying there is not that great. And so I think those are things as we think to and look to the future. It's about creating more units, absolutely, of affordable housing. But it's also about making sure that we have sufficient supports in the community, both in our more residential settings and in our in the community that can be dispersed to people who are being housed through rapid rehousing, through ERAP, through other Housing First initiatives.
And I think for Echoes, what we've been looking at is, you know, how we can maintain being an agile agency as we continue to grow. Because if you don't know Echoes' backstory, you know, we're a young little baby agency that kind of blew up over the last 5 to 6 years. And most recently, we had a house that was donated to us, actually, and we have a family that's housed there, and they had received an emergency housing voucher. And for those of you who have received those at your agency for clients, you know that it's been really challenging to place people with those vouchers because hardly anyone will accept them. And, you know, we have a subsidiary agency, not to get into the minutia of it, but that our subsidiary agency has decided to be a landlord to accept that voucher. So I know internally, you know, we're kind of trying to look at ways that we can not contribute to the issues that we're seeing with like landlords wanting to help out and, you know, trying to create additional units. So yeah, I think it's just really important to stay in touch with your community and to constantly be doing those needs assessments. And you know, we're constantly analyzing where are the gaps in service and what aren't we providing that, because that can change. I think, you know, as we've seen, the needs can change.
I think COVID illustrated just the magnitude of challenges we were facing before COVID. And we had a brief period of time where there was supplemental resources to help respond. We were able to do things more creatively, innovatively on the public health front to try to prevent infections, provide supports to households that did have an exposure or risk, make changes within operations for either shelter or other types of services. Then there was a enormous amount of rental assistance and other types of assistance that flowed to households. And there were things like the child tax credit that went directly to families' budgets that prevented them, you know, the data is out, it has conclusively been proven to reduce child poverty. So there was this enormous experimentation of what it looks like to have a robust safety net instead of what we have, which is more like a hammock with lots of big holes, gaping holes between each of the strands of the hammock. And so I think that's going to be a key thing. We have an opportunity to say as a community, we need to preserve that safety net. Part of that safety net is eviction prevention. Part of that safety net is services like the factory self-sufficiency advocates, or the RISE team at CAP, or the life coaches at Water Street, where they're trying to build that capacity. It's what our financial counselors are doing at Tenfold. So we need those things to be maintained. We need to continue the core homeless services, but we need to keep working upstream, pushing upstream on a lot of the solutions that I'm sure are being talked about in the other room, and we've talked about some of them here. The other thing that I think is really important is just making sure there's, in addition to understanding the magnitude of the problems through the statistics, like real stories. These are our neighbors who are affected by this, right? Mandy, who's in this room, has written a beautiful book that really profiles what some of those individuals are like and the relationships with them. And I think that lack of understanding of these are real people, these are our neighbors, fuel some of that NIMBYism. When you think that a third of our community is in that ALICE threshold, where they are one crisis away from falling deeper into poverty, that has to be people who live in your block, around the corner, like people you work with, people you pass at the grocery store. Like these are our fellow people who are part of our community, and we need to make sure that there's a deep appreciation for that, that there's policy solutions that are treating people with dignity. And recognizing that this could happen to anybody, right? When you look at some of the stories of people who have found themselves to be homeless, how many of them say, I never thought it would be me, right? I was working in this job, then I had a job loss, or I had to have major surgery on my back and then I wasn't able to work, and things happen, right? So it's not like it was purely as sometimes as a narrative, an assumption that it was decisions that people made, right? And of course, mental health plays a role, substance use plays a role, but those are big systemic problems too. That's just not about individuals as well. So that would be, when we think about like a 5-year strategy, 10-year strategy, it's got to keep people at the heart of it and really understanding the complexity, the diversity of those stories, and recognizing that they are our neighbors.
Raina had to hop off, but she just wanted to share that the YWCA is actually starting next month in turning more of their building into housing units. Once they complete this phase, she said their building will be 50% housing. So that's a big push from them in the near future.
I love all the cats and dogs that have made an appearance on this. It's one of the things when we're back in in-person settings, you'll definitely miss.
Yes, it's harder for them to shove their way in front of a screen.
Yeah, I think, Mike, your point about, what's going to be helpful in our community, a lot of it is, keeping, and this has been a conversation with Mike in my home under Jen's leadership, and I know it's going to continue to be under the new leadership with Deb and everybody at LCHRA, like to really be people-centered in our approaches. There's all kinds of great policy data and ideas coming from different sources about, here's how we handle the massive numbers, but we've got to keep it person-centric, understanding that each individual, this is something that a transformation we've undergone at Water Street is really looking at each individual for their unique journey of how they've gotten to the place where they are today. Their journey out is going to be just as unique and different. Understanding those individual stories from our perspective, recognizing that each individual is, created in the image of God and worthy of dignity and value. And so we're going to walk with them relationally. And I really believe, even in a housing first system, there's ways you can do that relationally focused, that really emphasizes the dignity of the individual and walking with them on a broader spectrum around that, and recognizing where the needs are and how churches and individuals in the community can get involved. We started, I guess about 5 years ago, a conversation where we gather together pastors and church leaders, and we've averaged, about 50 churches and over 100 leaders from different churches coming together for these events. It's called Compelled by Love, and the focus of it really was birthed out of the first one, where we had a lot of churches saying, hey, we know we want to get more engaged in caring for our neighbors who are experiencing poverty. But their first look was, we've got to come into the city. We've got to partner with Water Street or some other agency in the city in order to help poor people. And we were like, why do you assume that that is the right answer to this? Not that we don't want you to volunteer or donate, like, please do. But why is that the answer and the assumption that you're making? And we actually invited Dan German, a representative from Factory Ministries, and others to come. And we had a conversation about, what does poverty in Lancaster County really look like? It was right after the Poverty Commission had completed their work and their study. Izzy, I know you were a big part of writing that up, but like recognizing that numerically there are more people experiencing poverty. And when Mike talks about those ALICE individuals, there are more people under that designation living in the county than there are in the city. Percentage is higher in the city, but from raw numbers, significantly more individuals living below the poverty line in Lancaster County. And if you're leading a church out here in the county, you don't need to come running into the city to find somebody experiencing poverty or on the verge of homelessness. All you need to do is look around your neighborhood. The most common, demographic of somebody experiencing poverty is a single white mom living somewhere out in the county. And so trying to open the eyes of pastors and church leaders to say, if God calls us to love the poor, we need to just look around our neighborhood first. And if we learn how to love our neighbors better, and that became the theme for the first couple of years, it was the art of neighboring. What does it mean to love your literal neighbors, the people who live on your block? And if we start doing that more effectively, there will be less and less people showing up at Water Street or at Echoes or at the factory or any of our agencies. And so that, to me, that's a starting point. That's where anybody can get involved in a very simple way, is just paying attention to your literal neighbors, because you never know. I mean, I graduated from F&M, and in the last 2 years, I've had 3 individuals come through our door at Water Street that I knew from my time at F&M over 20 years ago. I don't want to say how many years ago, but it was a while ago. But I mean, I never expected that in my role at Water Street, that I'd be welcoming classmates into our shelter and walking with them on a journey back out of homelessness. But that's a reality that we face.
I think also,
Go for it.
sorry, I'll try to keep it brief. I think it also goes without saying to think about the next generation as well. The kids of those experiencing poverty. I know at our organization, we work with a lot of folks in generational poverty. So to get some of our older folks to kind of get out of that, it's not really necessarily feasible, but their kids, their grandkids then can be impacted by some of the programming that we have. I know the Pequea Valley School District is placing a huge focus right now on 3rd grade reading level. If we can get kids reading at a 3rd grade level, the trajectory of their life, jobs, all of those things is drastically different. So books in homes, reading to kids, programs like that really target just the next generation, that, good role models, different things, mentorship programs, all those sorts of things can help with the following generation coming through.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, because we 100% are behind that thinking at CAP. In fact, CAP in general is making a big shift to taking a 2-generational approach to all the work that we do. And so we have a lot of training and different things that are coming around, but currently we already have a pilot program called Together, which is working with single moms. But basically with this whole idea that we can't keep just saying, okay, we're going to help kids over here, we're going to help parents over here, we're going to help. We have to start saying, how are we making sure that when we're helping this mom get a better job, what is that better job for your family size? But how much money do you need to be making? What's that education that we can be supporting you in getting? But also, are your kids in high quality daycare? And, is our CAP daycare providing the support that they need to make sure that they're ready to get into school, which they are, but making sure that, we're if it's not CAPS daycare, if it's whatever daycare is close to them, is it high quality? Is it giving them what they need? Are we providing opportunities for not just them to be going to school or getting this better job or finding the right housing, but like, how do we help them to make sure they're creating really strong bonds and showing their kids what that looks like and having those conversations with them. So again, it's like breaking that generational repeat cycle and just really helping them like figure all that out. And to, if they, we don't know how far the mom will get, but the kid might get even further. So we're really excited about that work, and there's going to be a lot more coming out about that. And we're trying to work with the whole community and collaborating with the community on this as well. So we have a few projects in the pipeline.
Awesome, thanks. I will just put out a last call for questions. Anybody here, if you wanted to pop in a last minute question. Izzy, did you have something to add?
I think I would just say, while I have you all here, but really, while we're all in the room, I think there's a bias, and certainly we experience this at the city when we talk about how to combat homelessness, get people in homes, build affordable housing. There's a bias, I think, on the scale of institutions and a tendency for all of us, and certainly this happens at the city, to sort of overlook an effort that might house 4 people with dignity and go focus wholly on one that will house 60, 100, 150. And I think like that's admirable. And of course, we can all do math. I would just say, just because our long-term projects, the ones that are going to make the significant, changes, so for example, I think, we're hoping to see in the next 7 years, no fewer than 300 units of affordable housing developed in the city of Lancaster. Equally important are the efforts of the LGBTQ Coalition, their HEART program that will house like a household's worth of queer young folks, or the effort that I believe Good Sam just purchased a property in Lancaster City that's going to house 4 people, particularly who are re-entering citizens. And I just want to emphasize the importance of that as well, because it's going to take us a long time to produce the hundreds and thousands of units that we need. And just none of us to neglect that project that's making a difference to 1 family or 3 families or 5 families. Because as I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but whoever's representing from the factory talked about like doing this over generations, like every family that you help, that multiplies in the next generation. So,
Well, I don't have any last minute questions, and I'm not sure I can end on a better note than that of the little projects matter too, and it multiplies. So I want to thank you all so much for joining me tonight. We are letting the rooms end at their own times, so you are all just welcome to exit on your own. And thank you so much to the panelists and for those of you that joined us. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Rhoda. This is a great conversation.
Thanks so much.
Have a good night.